What? Damn you, Cheatham! I tell you, that cookie's a killing machine! What the hell?
Hello survivors and welcome to Survivor's Guild, the only channel that determines your odds of surviving 2008's scorched sequel, Gingerdead Man 2, The Passion of the Crust. So stay tuned till the end for your survival stats. I'm your sharp-dressed slasher turned toxic fan, GhostFake. Now I hope you like cookies that have greatly passed their sell-by date, cause this movie is getting spoiled. Gingerdead Man 2, directed by Silvia St Croix, and written by Muffy Bolding, William Butler, and Aaron Strongoni, starring Kevan Moezzi, Kelsey Sanders, Joseph Porter, Michelle Bauer, and John Vulich as Gary Busey as the Gingerdead Man. Gingerdead Man 2 is about a low-budget movie studio going through a production crisis, while a homicidal gingerbread man seeks a new fleshy host. We open up to a 3-minute recounting of Gingerdead Man 1 that fills in some of the missing ingredients. We learn here that Millard Findlemeyer's mom is a witch who took Millard's ashes and after adding a tablespoon of black magic, had to deliver to Sarah and prayed to God that some idiot would bleed into it. We flash forward to this movie, where we cut over to Cheatham Studios, where multiple low-budget horror and schlock movies are produced, including Tiny Terrors, which is to Cheatham Studios what Puppet Master is to Full Moon. The studio is currently working on Tiny Terrors 9, Purgatory of the Petite.
Or brain.
When one of the puppets malfunctions and brings the production to a halt. The director agrees to take 5 and reset, while everyone else complains about their working conditions and rushed production. We get introduced to Kelvin Cheatham, who inherited the studio from his father, whom we inherit into the meat bank at deposit number 1. We find out that a lot of the crew have stuck with the studio in spite of diminishing returns because Kelvin's father helped them get their careers started, but they have the urge to jump ship before it sinks, believing the genre to be dead, as well as the studio.
But let's face it, the genre is dead. And so is this operation.
But Kelvin is optimistic that the low-budget flicks that they are pumping out will eventually break the mold and usher in a new dawn for the studio.
Cheatham International is far from dead, fellas. This is just a little detour.
We cut over to Polly Bunderhoff, whose sister sent her a box of baked goods from Waco, Texas. Well, that sounds like a tremendous waste of money. And she reveals a box full of random baked goods, including one Gingerdead Man. And while this dude complains about the quality of the confections.
Are you joking? These things are stale.
A fight breaks out on set when the actors revolt.
I gave you a blowjob!
You too?
And the director complains about not being paid enough to deal with it, and the crew complain about the director getting paid, since they aren't. Meanwhile, the Gingerdead Man watches and delights in the violence. Cut over to the entrance of the studio where we get introduced to Tommy and Heather. Heather works for the End of the Rainbow Last Wish Foundation, and Tommy is a participant.
I feel like I'm the luckiest boy in the whole world.
Having reached the end of his rainbow, and his last wish being to tour the studio that created his favorite franchise, the Tiny Terrors. They run into Kelvin, who is trying to console a stagehand who got her nose broke in the scuffle, and after cheering her up, he turns his attention to Heather and Tommy, whom he assumes are here for the lawsuit over the recalled Tiny Terror action figures, before Heather tells him who they are, and Tommy reveals himself to be a Cheatham superfan.
I have every single movie he ever made. He changed my life, or what's left of it anyway.
Kelvin gives them a tour of the studio when Marty interrupts their tour to warn Kelvin about the studio's cash flow problems and the fact that the Tiny Terrors 9 script got leaked onto the internet and fans are tearing it apart. And he warns him about one particular reviewer, Demon Warrior 13,
movie reviewer, horror reviewer, calls himself Demon Warrior 13, alright?
who started a boycott campaign to get Cheatham Studios to shut down production. Kelvin says that it'll deal with it later and continues on their tour, but when he goes to introduce them to Sir Ian Kavanagh, his star talent, Jake the stuntman stops him because Ian is holed up in his trailer.
Basically thinks this movie's a piece of shit. He hates the script, and more importantly, he hates you.
Upset about the script of Tiny Terrors 9, and the fact that he agreed to be in it, having believed it to be a family drama that he only agreed to as a favor for a dearly departed friend, only to find out that what was sold to him is not what it is. Cut over to the Gingerdead Man, who is running around the set trying to find out how to get a new body, since his is crumbling. He finds a book of satanic spells that was being used as a prop for Tiny Terrors 9.
Spellbooks, how wonderfully contrived.
And looks up a spell for transmigration, to transfer his soul into a different body. And he finds one that requires 5 victims, whose blood must be on the 5 points of a pentagram, with a final virgin sacrifice to achieve transmigration.
Easy as pie. This is gonna be a cakewalk.
Gingerdead Man immediately dispatches this rando into the meat bank at deposit number 2, and then he sets his sights on the makeup artist, who he distracts by tipping over a liquid container, before turning the heat up on his industrial-strength curling iron. And while he cleans up the spill and complains about the working conditions, Gingerdead Man takes the curling iron and shoves it into his ass, burning and electrocuting him into the meat bank at deposit number 3. He then climbs into the air ducts and makes his way to the men's room where Polly has cornered one of the actors.
Real good to hear my boy's getting enough roughage in his diet.
The actor attempts to leave, but Polly won't let him, and eventually makes him an offer that he can't refuse.
I'll introduce you to every casting director in town.
And while those two go to Pollywood, the Gingerdead Man needs one out before he stabs Polly into the meat bank at deposit number 4, and then stabs through her into the actor into the meat bank at deposit number 5, and he then goes hunting for his next victim.
My work here is done.
Meanwhile, Kelvin has been showing Heather and Tommy around all of the sets, and talking about everything the studio has accomplished, as well as striking up a romance with Heather, before the trio land at Sir Ian's trailer, where Kelvin tries to mend their relationship.
Heck, even the terminally ill Tommy here. Oh, he loves you.
Cut back over to Gingerdead, who has found his next victim, taking the form of the overworked special effects guy from earlier, who is currently trying to fix one of the tiny terrors, before the Gingerdead Man takes full advantage of the situation.
I'll ride you long and hard. Come here, baby.
While the effects guy's hand is trapped in the puppet, but Gingerdead Man turns on his new love and stabs his knife through her and straight into the dude's hand, before he uses a prop puppet chainsaw to cut off his whole hand, just as Kelvin shows up with Heather and Tommy to introduce them to the effects guy. The Gingerdead Man runs off, and Kelvin warns everyone over the walkie-talkies to get out of there as fast as possible, while Heather attempts to help the effects guy. Kelvin tries calling the cops, but they hang up on him as soon as he mentions a killer cookie, naturally. And Heather notices that Tommy is missing. Heather and Kelvin go to try to find Tommy, even though Kelvin has reservations.
I mean, how much time does he really have left anyway?
When they enter one of the sets for a schlock film set in space, when they run into Jake, who has his eye hanging out of his head, who promptly attempts to calm everyone down.
Pull yourself together!
Before making everyone panic.
I tell you, that cookie's a killing machine!
But Gingerdead shows up manning a laser-shooting robot and blasts Jake into the meat bank at deposit number 6. Kelvin goes toe-to-toe with the killer confection, who tosses him to the side and turns his attention to Heather.
You ready to have your bagel toasted, baby?
But his killer mech shorts out when someone cuts into his power supply, and the mystery hero turns out to be none other than
Demon Warrior 13?
Also known as Tommy the Terror Goldberg.
Here's Tommy!
An esteemed film critic and columnist for the horror website BloodyFishers.com. The very critic who wanted to get Cheatham Studios shut down. He reveals that he faked being terminally ill in order to take revenge for the countless scripts that he wrote that were rejected by Cheatham Studios and sent back unopened.
Well, we really try not to accept unsolicited mail.
And that he brought explosives to destroy the studio once and for good. Kelvin distracts him and buys them some time by offering Tommy a movie deal, telling him that he's just the type of guy he needs on his team to revitalize Cheatham Studios.
You do know I live with my mother, right? And I operate out of her basement.
No, I didn't know that.
Jeez. It took Scream till 2022 to address toxic fandom, when Gingerdead Man was doing it back in 2008. Shameful. Heather sneaks up behind Tommy to clobber him over the head, not realizing until it's too late that she was holding a piece of styrofoam, but she at least distracts him long enough for Kelvin to pull the wires on his bomb, while the Gingerdead Man climbs out of his downed robot. Cut over to the set of Tiny Terrors 9, where Tommy has restrained Kelvin and Heather, and he has set up the puppets as an audience for their murder, where he also plans on reading from the prop spellbook, the very spellbook that Gingerdead's soul-transferring transmigrational spell came from. How convenient. But as Tommy begins reading the spell, Gingerdead pops up and stabs Tommy, making him the virgin sacrifice that the spell calls for, sacrificing Tommy into the meat bank at deposit number 7, and spilling his blood into the pentagram on the floor. Gingerdead tells the duo that since he's not sure the FX guy died, he needs one more sacrifice to make sure that he has all 5 sacrifices necessary to achieve transmigration. Now, I went back to make sure that I didn't screw up the count, but he's already got 5 kills, plus the virgin, whether the effects guy died or not. So he's the one that miscounted, not me. And I guess that the spell knows that he's killed enough, so it begins taking effect and for some reason brings the Tiny Terrors to life. The Tiny Terrors then proceed to crucify the deadly doughboy, before lighting him on fire, I think? When, out of nowhere, Sir Ian shows up with his AK and blows the Tiny Terrors to smithereens, believing to be filming Tiny Terrors 9.
You did get all that, didn't ya?
before questioning where the crew is and whether they were even filming that. Cut to the alleyway behind the studio, where Toothless McHomeless, played by Adam Green, is digging through the trash for food and finds a burnt Gingerdead Man that he immediately devours, and is then possessed by, and the movie ends. Now let's take a look at our main characters and the death that surrounds them to determine your odds of surviving this movie. We start off our meat bank deposits with Kelvin's dad, ruining his legacy at deposit number 1. We then get this random person dying off screen at deposit number 2. This makeup artist stereotypes in at deposit number 3. Polly and this actor take a trip to Pollywood at deposits 4 and 5. Jake sends everyone into a panic at deposit number 6. And we wrap up our meat bank deposits with Tommy the Terror Goldberg, toxic fandoming in at deposit number 7, into the meat bank. Now let's take a look at our survivors. We've got Kelvin, Heather, and Sir Ian Kavanagh, which means that out of a total of 10 characters, only 3 survive, giving you a 30% chance of surviving this movie. Given those odds, what would your final wish be to the end of the Rainbow Last Wish Foundation? Let me know in the comments below. And if this is your first time on my channel, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And a huge thanks to my patrons for keeping this studio afloat. I seriously appreciate it. And congrats to the one and only Toby, Tobias4223, for winning March's GhostFake mask draw. Check out the Patreon page linked in the description of this video if that sounds interesting to you. Alrighty guys, as always, thanks and don't die.